Imagine returning home after a relaxing girls' trip, excited to get back to your own bed, your own space. You've been away for a few days, and with your pregnancy nearing its end, the thought of comfort, peace, and rest fills your mind. But when you walk through the door, everything changes. The sight that greets you isn't the quiet home you expected. It's not your peaceful sanctuary at all. No, it's a nightmare. There, in your own bed, are the two people you trusted the most. Your husband, David, the father of your children, the man you've loved since you were just 15 years old, and your mother, Linda, the woman who gave you life, the one who guided you through every difficult decision, every moment of joy and pain. They're not just in the same room. They're in the most intimate of ways. They're in your bed, in a way you never could have imagined. In that instant, everything that Jennifer thought she knew about love, trust, and family collapses. How could this happen? How could they betray her in such a deeply personal way? This wasn't just a moment of infidelity. It was a cruel, devastating betrayal that lasted for over 20 years. A secret affair, hidden under the guise of normalcy, buried beneath years of shared memories and family moments. The truth had been buried, tucked away, behind smiles, conversations, and promises. But now, it's out in the open. And there Jennifer stands, pregnant with her last child, 7 months along, facing a betrayal that feels like it's been set in motion her entire life. For her, this isn't just the end of a marriage. This is the end of everything she thought was real. Her world, which once seemed stable and safe, now feels like a house of cards, ready to fall at any moment. But she's not just devastated by what she's seen. She's furious. She's hurt. She's lost. What do you do when the people you trusted most have torn everything apart? What happens when the foundation of your life, your family, your marriage, crumbles into a pile of secrets and lies? But this is where it gets even darker. It's not just the betrayal of her husband, David, or her mother, Linda. There's more. There's a secret waiting to be uncovered, and it's about to change everything. Her father, Peter, devastated by what he's learned, demands a DNA test. He needs to know if the 3 youngest children, the ones he's raised, are actually his. His entire life is shattered by the weight of this one decision. A DNA test, a cold and final act that will prove the deepest fears of a man who once thought he had a family he could trust. The results are about to tear open wounds no one could ever expect. Because the truth, in this case, is even more horrifying than the betrayal itself. Stay with me as we uncover how Jennifer's life was turned upside down by a truth too awful to ignore. A truth that destroyed families, shattered trust, and left everyone wondering how they could have missed the signs. What happens next is the stuff of nightmares, and it's far from over. Experience the world. David was older, more mature, and at that moment, it felt like he was everything she needed. He was kind, attentive, and made her feel safe in a way no one else had. At 17, Jennifer found out she was pregnant. It wasn't planned, but it didn't matter. David stood by her, offering support as they quickly transitioned into the responsibilities of parenthood. By 18, they were married, young, perhaps a little naive, but together, they had the world at their feet. It wasn't the perfect fairy tale, but it was their version of happiness. They moved in with Jennifer's parents to start, but life didn't stay static for long. A few years later, they found an old, empty house next door to Jennifer's childhood home, a place that had once belonged to her grandparents. It wasn't much at first, but they poured their energy into turning it into a family home. Over time, that house became more than just a physical structure. It became a symbol of their future, their growing family, their dreams. With every new child came a new sense of purpose. They had 4 kids, each with a wide gap between them. Jennifer had always prided herself on being a devoted mother, nurturing each of her children with care, always putting them first. But the distance between her children's ages meant she'd always had to juggle different stages of motherhood, different needs, different personalities, and different dreams. By the time Jennifer turned 40, life felt like it had finally settled. Her youngest was almost 5, her oldest was 21, and things were starting to feel normal. Sure, there were challenges, like any family had, but Jennifer had David by her side, and that had always been enough. She never imagined that everything she knew could come crashing down so suddenly. David, her husband, was the rock of their family, always reliable, always present. He worked hard, providing for the family, while Jennifer balanced the demands of raising their children. There was a rhythm to their life. There was stability, or so she thought. Linda, Jennifer's mother, had been her anchor, the person Jennifer turned to for advice, guidance, and comfort. They had a close bond. Growing up, Jennifer always looked up to her mother. Linda was strong, protective, and someone Jennifer felt she could trust with her deepest secrets. Jennifer could never have imagined that the very person she had leaned on her whole life was capable of destroying everything. On the surface, everything seemed normal. The kids were healthy, the house was a home, and Jennifer and David were the couple that seemed like they could weather any storm. The family gathered on holidays, birthdays, and even simple weekends. Jennifer couldn't remember the last time there had been a real fight, a serious argument. They had their routine. They had their comfort. Their life was predictable, at least, that's what Jennifer believed. But lurking beneath the surface was something that had remained hidden for years. It wasn't something Jennifer had ever suspected, not even in her wildest imagination. The woman she trusted more than anyone in the world, the woman who had been there to guide her through the toughest moments of her life, had been hiding a secret so enormous that it would shatter everything Jennifer thought she knew about love, family, and trust. David had betrayed Jennifer in the most unimaginable way, and yet, that betrayal wasn't even the worst of it. Because as Jennifer discovered that fateful night when she returned home early from her girls' trip, the affair wasn't just with some stranger, some random woman. No, it was with Linda, her own mother. The one person she'd never considered as a threat. The one person she thought she could always count on. The discovery was more than just a shock. It was a life-altering revelation. Jennifer was 7 months pregnant with her 5th child, a child that had been conceived during what now seemed like an endless cycle of deception. In that moment, Jennifer's world shattered. Her husband had been sleeping with her mother for over 20 years, right under her nose, and she had never suspected a thing. For all those years, Jennifer had thought she knew what love and family were. She had thought that she was living the dream. But this secret, this dark truth, had been hiding in plain sight. The nights when her mother had stayed over for dinner, the quiet conversations between Linda and David that always seemed a little too intimate. The small gestures, the glances, the comfort they had found in each other. Jennifer had seen them all, but never for what they truly were. David's betrayal cut deep. It was a wound that could never fully heal. But the betrayal from her mother, Linda, was even worse. It was the kind of hurt that changed who you were, that left you questioning everything you thought you knew about love, loyalty, and trust. Jennifer's heart felt broken in ways she couldn't explain. Her family, the very people she had given everything to, had turned on her in the most unforgivable way. And she wasn't the only one who was going to suffer the consequences. Her father, Peter, had his own suspicions. He had known something wasn't right, and now, with Jennifer's revelation, his fears had been confirmed. In a moment of devastation, Peter demanded a DNA test for their 3 youngest children. He needed to know if they were truly his. He needed to know if all those years of raising them, loving them, were based on lies. For Jennifer, it felt like the ground had been ripped out from beneath her. Her entire life, the foundation of her family, had been built on lies. And now, as the DNA test results loomed over them all, Jennifer knew that nothing would ever be the same again. What would the results reveal? How would they all move forward after such a devastating discovery? The answers were still unknown, but the truth was finally coming to light, and it was about to destroy everything. Corner of her home, every object she touched, seemed to carry the weight of the secret that had unraveled her life. The sound of her children's laughter in the background felt like a cruel reminder of what was happening behind closed doors. How could everything have seemed so perfect for so long? How could the people she loved most in this world, her husband, her mother, betray her in such a gut-wrenching way? Her mind couldn't rest. She kept replaying every memory, every conversation she'd ever had with her mother and David, trying to piece together the fragments of their lives together. The holidays, the dinners, the quiet moments they'd shared, They all felt like a facade now. How had she missed the signs? How had she not seen the subtle shifts, the way her mother's eyes lingered a little too long on David, or how David's tone would soften whenever he spoke to Linda? Jennifer had trusted them both, completely. Her mother had been the one person she turned to when things went wrong, the one person she could rely on. And David had been the man she'd started her family with, the man she believed she would grow old with. And now, all of that had been tainted by an affair that had been going on for over 2 decades. The pain was unbearable, and Jennifer didn't know how to move forward. She was carrying a child, her 5th, and yet all she could think about was how broken her world had become. How could she look at David the same way again? How could she trust her mother, the woman who had always been her pillar of strength, the woman who should have protected her? The betrayal cut so deep that it felt like it had shattered her very soul. But what was even more crushing was the thought of her father, Peter. He had always been the steady, unwavering presence in their home, the man who had given everything for his family. And now, in the wake of this revelation, his world was just as shattered as hers. His heart was heavy with the pain of knowing that the children he had raised, his own flesh and blood, might not even be his. The DNA test results would soon reveal the truth, and the consequences of that truth would be life-altering for everyone involved. Jennifer could see the pain in her father's eyes every time they spoke. He was trying to hold it together, trying to keep his family intact, but the weight of the truth was too much to bear. He had always been the one who took care of everyone, the one who had always been there to fix things, to make them right. But this time, there was no fixing it. This time, the damage was too deep. And then there was the tension between Jennifer and Linda. Her mother, the woman who had raised her, nurtured her, and taught her everything she knew, had betrayed her in the most unimaginable way. Jennifer couldn't even look at her without feeling the sting of anger and hurt. Linda tried to apologize, tried to explain herself, but Jennifer couldn't bring herself to listen. What could she possibly say that would make this better? There was no justification for what she had done, no way to make it right. As the days turned into weeks, Jennifer found herself drifting in and out of a fog. She tried to keep her mind occupied by focusing on her pregnancy, but it was impossible to ignore the overwhelming sense of loss. Her world had been turned upside down, and there was no clear path forward. She felt betrayed by the 2 people she had trusted the most in this world, and the weight of that betrayal was almost more than she could bear. The DNA test results were looming. Jennifer didn't know what to expect. Would her father's suspicions be confirmed? Would the truth destroy what was left of her family? The thought of the results, of the truth coming to light, was terrifying. And yet, there was a strange part of her that needed to know, that needed to see the undeniable proof. It was the only way to move forward, one way or another. But as Jennifer prepared for the inevitable, she knew that nothing could ever be the same. The world she had known, the life she had built, was gone. The lies had been exposed, and there was no turning back. How would she ever look at David or Linda the same way again? How would she explain to her children that their lives had been built on a foundation of betrayal? All she could do now was wait, for the results, for the truth, and for whatever came next. But no matter what happened, Jennifer knew that the future would never be the same. The family she had known and loved had fractured beyond repair, and nothing would ever heal the wounds that had been inflicted. The only question now was, could they all survive the fallout? Would they be able to rebuild? Or would the secrets that had been exposed tear them all apart forever? As Jennifer sat alone in her room, the weight of the moment heavy on her chest, she couldn't help but feel that nothing would ever be the same again. And no matter what the DNA results showed, the betrayal had already claimed everything that had once been her world. Confusion and disbelief had settled into her bones, each moment a reminder that her world had crumbled beyond recognition. She had tried to go through the motions of life, but each glance at David or her mother sent a tidal wave of emotions rushing over her. How could they? How could they betray her in such a gut-wrenching way? One afternoon, as Jennifer sat in the living room, staring blankly at the television, her mind kept drifting back to that horrifying moment. The memory was burned into her mind. She could still see it so clearly. Walking in on her husband and her mother, locked in an intimate embrace, the silence in the room screaming louder than any words could. She could hear her own heartbeat in her ears, a thunderous rhythm that drowned out everything else. For a split second, time had seemed to freeze. Her mother, Linda, had jumped back in shock, her face pale with fear, while David looked like he'd seen a ghost. There was no hiding from what Jennifer had just witnessed. And then the words, broken, trembling, barely audible, came from Linda's lips. "Jennifer, I'm so sorry." Sorry? How could that one word even begin to make sense of the unimaginable betrayal that had just been laid bare in front of her? Jennifer had turned away before either of them could say anything else. She had run out of the house, desperate to escape, desperate to breathe. She didn't know where to go, but she had to get away from them, away from the suffocating weight of their lies. For hours, she wandered through the neighborhood, her mind racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Her heart was torn apart, piece by piece, and every time she tried to stitch it back together, the fragments seemed to shatter further. The shock of what she had seen had still not worn off. How long had this been going on? How long had her mother and husband kept this secret? 22 years, more than 2 decades of lies, of shared moments, of stolen intimacy. Jennifer thought back to the times when she had been happy, when she had trusted these two people more than anyone else in her life. How could everything she had known be so completely false? Then, just when she thought the pain could not get any worse, Peter, her father, spoke the words that would change everything. It had been a quiet evening when he called her into the kitchen, his face grim, his voice uncharacteristically somber. "Jennifer, we need to talk." His words were sharp, filled with an intensity that immediately sent a shiver down her spine. "About what, Dad?" Jennifer asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Peter stood by the kitchen counter, his hand trembling slightly as he reached for a piece of paper. The paper was official-looking, and as he placed it down in front of Jennifer, she felt a knot form in her stomach. "This is the DNA test," he said, his voice steady but with a trace of sadness in it. "I need to know the truth. I need to know if these kids are mine." Jennifer's breath caught in her throat. Her mind raced. What did this mean? What was he saying? She stared at the paper in front of her, barely able to comprehend its significance. The test would reveal the truth about her 3 youngest children, children she had birthed with David, who, at this point, seemed to be the very embodiment of deceit. Was there any way these children weren't his? What kind of world was she living in now? Peter's voice broke through her thoughts. "I've had my suspicions for a while, Jennifer, but now, with everything that's happened." His words trailed off, and he shook his head, his eyes full of hurt and confusion. "I need to know if they're mine, because if they're not, then everything we've built, everything we've worked for, it's all been a lie." Jennifer sat in silence for a moment, her world spinning. The room seemed to close in on her, the walls pressing against her chest as the gravity of the situation hit her. She had known her father to be a man of integrity, a man who worked tirelessly for his family. And now, in the wake of her mother's betrayal, everything was being called into question. She felt a mixture of anger and disbelief rising inside her. Her mother's affair with David had already shattered the family's trust. Now, the DNA test was going to tear apart everything she had believed about her children's heritage. Was this truly her family, or had it been a web of deceit for years? How could her father even be questioning the paternity of his own children? It was almost too much to bear. Jennifer stood up abruptly, her hands shaking as she grabbed the paper. "What am I supposed to do with this?" she demanded, her voice rising. "How can you even ask me to go through with this? How can you think?" Peter cut her off gently, but with an urgency that made Jennifer's blood run cold. "Jennifer, I need to know. I'm not accusing anyone of anything, but I need the truth. For all of us." His eyes were tired, worn out from the weight of the situation. "The truth is all we have left now." Jennifer felt the weight of his words settle heavily in her chest. The truth, the one thing she had wanted more than anything, the one thing that seemed to have eluded her entire life, was now staring her in the face. There was no turning back. The test was a symbol of finality. Whatever the results, there would be no undoing what had already been done. The betrayal was no longer just about David and Linda's affair. It was about her entire identity, her family, and the fragile fabric that had held it all together. Jennifer's world had fractured, and she was about to get the answer to the question that had been haunting her for days. Were her children truly her father's? Or was the lie even more insidious than she had ever imagined? The silence in the room felt deafening as Jennifer and her father both waited for the inevitable. The test results would arrive soon, and when they did, everything would change again. Her mother. Each one flashed before her eyes, all of them distant now, almost alien. Her own family had become strangers. Peter, standing quietly at the doorway, watched his daughter in silence, his face pale. The man who had been her protector, the one she had looked up to for guidance, seemed to crumble before her very eyes. He had always been the one person who kept her grounded, her father, her rock. But now, he was merely a bystander to a calamity he could neither stop nor undo. "You're telling me?" Jennifer started, but her voice cracked, and she could barely finish the sentence. Her father didn't respond, his silence hanging heavily in the room. "You knew, didn't you?" Jennifer finally managed, her gaze snapping to Peter. The room seemed to shrink as the words hung between them. Peter's expression faltered for a brief moment before he quickly steadied himself. "I had suspicions, but I never imagined it would be like this." His voice was soft, almost defeated. "I didn't want to know." Jennifer's eyes filled with disbelief. The man she had called her father had known something, some part of the truth, and yet he had remained silent all this time. The weight of his nonchalance crushed her further, but the larger betrayal, the one that went beyond family lines, gnawed at her insides. David. David had betrayed her with her own mother, and now, with the DNA test results, everything had shifted. But what she didn't expect was what came next. David had tried to hold onto his composure through the confrontation, but Jennifer could tell it was only a facade. His eyes flickered with something she couldn't place: fear, guilt, but most of all, a deep-seated resentment. His posture was stiff, but when he spoke, the tension in his voice was undeniable. "Jennifer, it's not what you think," he started, but Jennifer wasn't having it. "Not what I think." She couldn't contain the fury that had been building inside her. "David, don't you dare say that. You've been sleeping with my mother for years, and now I find out you've been lying about the paternity of my children? You've betrayed me in ways I never thought possible." David opened his mouth, as though trying to explain, but no words came. Jennifer wasn't sure if he even cared enough to make an excuse anymore. He seemed detached, as though a part of him had already checked out long before this moment. The tension in the room thickened, and Jennifer felt like she was suffocating. She needed answers. Needed to know how deep the lies ran, how much of her life had been a carefully constructed web of deceit. But as the truth started to unravel, she realized it wasn't just about David anymore. Her mother, Linda. Jennifer had always thought of Linda as her pillar of strength, the one who had raised her with love and guidance. How could she have been so blind? It was like she was looking at a stranger now. Every word of sympathy, every piece of advice her mother had ever given her, seemed laced with hypocrisy. How could Linda have been so cold? How could she have lied to her face for all those years, watching her daughter raise children that weren't even her husband's? Jennifer took a deep breath, forcing the tears back as she turned toward her mother, who had been standing in the corner, silent throughout the confrontation. Linda had the decency to look guilty, her eyes shifting nervously, her lips pressed tightly together. But Jennifer wasn't sure whether the look in her mother's eyes was regret or something more. Could she truly feel sorry for her actions, or was it simply a matter of getting caught? "You knew," Jennifer whispered. The words a sting. "You knew, and you didn't stop it. You let me believe it was all okay, that everything was normal, while you were with him, my own husband." Linda didn't respond at first. The guilt was there, unmistakable, but it didn't seem enough. Jennifer could feel the betrayal radiating from every word her mother didn't say. Linda's silence was deafening, more telling than any apology could ever be. Finally, Linda spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't plan for any of this to happen. I never thought it would go this far. But once it did, there was no turning back. And I never wanted to hurt you." Jennifer shook her head in disbelief. "Hurt me? You've shattered everything, Mom. You've shattered me." Her mother's shoulders sagged, but she didn't apologize again. Jennifer couldn't understand it. How could a mother betray her daughter like this? And how could her own father have let it go on for so long without taking action? There was an uncomfortable silence that followed, the kind that could suffocate any remaining ounce of hope. Jennifer felt the distance between her and her parents growing wider, and yet, she still had to confront something even more unsettling. What about the kids? How could she face her children now? How would they see David? They had always trusted him, looked up to him. Would they even be able to forgive him? And what about her mother? Would the kids ever be able to trust Linda again? Jennifer's heart sank at the thought. The betrayal didn't just affect her. It had the power to tear apart her entire family, to shatter the innocence of her children, leaving them with scars that could last a lifetime. And in that moment, as the full weight of the situation hit her, Jennifer realized that the most painful truth was yet to come. It wasn't just about David and Linda. It was about the future, about how this revelation would change everything they all had known. Her family had become fractured, their bonds twisted beyond recognition, and no matter how hard she tried, Jennifer knew it would never be the same again. The lies, the deceit, the betrayals, it had all come crashing down in a single moment. But now, Jennifer had to decide. Would she continue to fight for the family she had known? Or would she let the walls come crumbling down and start over, alone, with only the truth to guide her? The twists and turns were far from over. Jennifer's heart felt as though it was breaking in slow motion. She could hear their voices, her husband David and her mother Linda, murmuring apologies and pleading for her forgiveness. But nothing they said could undo the crushing weight of their betrayal. For 22 years, they had deceived her, lying right under her nose, while she raised their children, built a life with David, and trusted Linda to be a loving, supportive mother. Now, in one gut-wrenching instant, everything she knew was shattered. David sat at the dinner table, his face pale, his eyes avoiding hers. Linda sat beside him, her hands trembling, trying to muster the words that would somehow make up for what they had done. Jennifer could barely look at them. She felt nauseous, her stomach churning in disgust. This wasn't just betrayal. It was the ultimate betrayal. The man she loved, the woman who had given her life, both had stolen her trust, her love, and her happiness. The house was eerily quiet, except for the clink of silverware against the plates. Dinner had been prepared, but it felt like the whole room was suffocating. Jennifer set the table carefully, her hands steady but her mind racing. Tonight, there would be no confrontation, no screaming. Tonight, the only thing she would serve was justice. The anger that had built up inside her over the past week, the raw fury from the betrayal she had uncovered, it all came to a boiling point. The DNA test results had revealed the unthinkable. Her mother and her husband had been in a secret affair for 22 years, and it was time for them to feel the weight of their deceit. She watched as David and Linda entered the dining room. Her husband, looking tired but trying to appear normal, took his seat at the head of the table. Her mother, trying to keep her eyes from meeting Jennifer's, quietly sat beside him. The awkward tension hung thick in the air, but neither of them dared to speak. Jennifer, for her part, made sure to keep her cool. She smiled softly, masking the storm that was brewing inside her. She had spent the last several hours preparing the meal, a dinner that, on the surface, appeared nothing out of the ordinary. But hidden beneath the carefully arranged plates was a plan. Tonight, she would serve them a course they would never forget. She poured the wine, careful to make sure both glasses were filled evenly. With a slight tremble, she watched as David picked up his glass, taking a deep sip. Linda followed suit, the two of them oblivious to what had been mixed into their drinks. The poison she had carefully selected would take effect soon enough. It was tasteless, odorless, and slow-acting, perfect for what Jennifer had in mind. Dinner proceeded in silence. Jennifer could barely bring herself to eat. The irony was too much to bear. She watched as David took another bite of his food, his face still not acknowledging the tension that hung in the room. Linda, on the other hand, was nervously picking at her plate, her guilt written all over her face. Neither one of them had the slightest idea what was coming. As the minutes ticked by, Jennifer could see their expressions begin to change. David started to shift in his seat, his face flushing slightly. Linda seemed to be having trouble swallowing, her eyes darting to Jennifer every now and then. Jennifer held back a smirk. It was happening. The poison was working. David suddenly looked up, his hand reaching to his chest. Jennifer, I don't feel. He cut off mid-sentence, his voice weak. He glanced at Linda, who now looked as though she might faint. Are you okay? Linda asked, her voice wavering. David couldn't respond. His body jerked slightly as he coughed, the color draining from his face. Jennifer stood, watching intently, her heart racing in anticipation. The years of deceit, the years of hidden pain. This was the moment it all culminated in. Linda, visibly panicking now, turned to her daughter. What did you do to us, Jennifer? Her voice was shaky, her eyes wide in disbelief as she clutched at her chest, her own breath coming in shallow gasps. Jennifer stood silently, her face unreadable. She had been preparing for this moment for days, studying the poison, making sure everything would go according to plan. She wasn't just punishing them for what they had done to her, but for the years of heartache they had caused her and the family. She wanted them to understand, even if it was too late. The room seemed to close in on her as David and Linda struggled to breathe. The poison was doing its job, slowly incapacitating them. It would only be a matter of time before they passed out completely, leaving Jennifer alone with her thoughts and her revenge. Jennifer's mind was calm as she watched the life drain from them both. This was what she had wanted. This was her justice, a reckoning for the two people who had torn apart her world. She wasn't afraid. In fact, there was an odd sense of peace settling over her as the realization hit. They had gotten away with their secret for far too long. Now, they would pay the ultimate price. As the poison began to take its effect, Jennifer watched with cold detachment as David and Linda slowly succumbed to their fate. The years of betrayal, of heartache, all led to this moment. The woman who had once loved her husband, the woman who had once trusted her mother, was now standing over them, her hands trembling not from fear, but from the weight of everything she had been forced to carry. David's face twisted in agony, his breath shallow and labored. Linda, too, struggled, her hand clutching at her chest as the poison did its work. But Jennifer remained eerily calm, her gaze unwavering, as if she had been waiting for this moment her entire life. The table was still, save for their labored breathing. No more words. The silence was deafening. Jennifer took a deep breath, the reality of what she had just done settling over her like a heavy shroud. The revenge she had so carefully orchestrated was finally complete. But as she stood there, watching them slip away, a hollow feeling spread through her chest. Was this really enough? Was it worth it? The answer to those questions would never come, because in the aftermath of everything, the lies, the betrayal, the heartbreak, what remained was a family torn apart beyond repair. Even before her father, Peter, could call David and Linda to justice, Jennifer had gotten her vengeance, but at what cost? Her world, her family, her sanity, all of it had been irrevocably shattered. She looked down at her hands, stained with the consequences of a twisted and tragic love story. There would be no going back now. And as the final breath left David's body, Jennifer knew the one truth that would haunt her forever. Some secrets, no matter how well hidden, could never be undone. If you found this story chilling, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. The complexity of family secrets and betrayal can be both haunting and fascinating, and we've got more stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. What do you think of Jennifer's shocking decision? Could you ever understand her actions? Or was there a better way to seek justice? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Stay with us for more gripping true crime stories. Subscribe, stay curious, and remember, sometimes truth is more terrifying than fiction. Thanks so much for watching.